Alright, so let's find all zeros of this polynomial. It's 2x to the fourth plus x cubed minus 7x squared minus 3x plus 3. Alright, so we notice that this is a fourth degree polynomial, which means that we should have 4 solutions, right? So where do we begin, right? Well, we got to get our p's and q's. So we're going to use the rational zeros theorem, try to figure out what all the possible rational roots are, right? So p are all possible factors of the last number, the constant term here, which is 1 and 3. Q would be all possible combinations of the first term here, right? The leading term is 2, so Q would be 1 and 2. And now we want to get all combinations of P over Q, including the negatives, right? So we get 1 over 1, we get 3 over 1, and we get 1 half, and we get 3 halves, right? Including the negative. So that makes 8 possible rational zeros, right? So, I mean, what we can gain from this is we know that 2, right? 2 is not going to be a 0, right? There's no possible way that 2 is a 0 or even negative 2, right? These are the only possible rational zeros, right? So what should we do now? We should just plug them in and see what we get, right? Because then if we get 0, then we've found one of the solutions, right? So it's always a good idea to plug in 1, right? That's always a good number to pick first. So we'll plug into 1, right? So we'll plug into 1, we get 2 times 1 to the fourth plus 1 to the third power. Right, so we're just going to go ahead and plug into 1 into each of these guys here and work everything out, right? So we get 2 plus 1 minus 7 minus 3 plus 3. And this gives us, what does this give us as a final answer? It gives us negative 4, right? So what does that tell us about 1? Right? 1 is not going to be a solution. So let's try negative 1. Okay, so we'll plug in negative 1. We'll do the same thing. We'll plug in the negative 1 and work everything out, right? If we get 0, then that's good, right? We have found our first solution. If the remainder does not equal 0, then we just got to keep going here, right? Okay, it's low. This becomes 2. This becomes a minus 1. Right, you got to be careful with this one, though, right? Negative 1 squared is positive 1. That's minus 7 plus 3 here. Right, so we get 1, negative 6, plus 6. We get a 0 here. Okay, so that's good. So what have we done? We've plugged in negative 1. We've gotten 0. So that concludes, we can conclude that negative 1 is a solution, right? So, well, that makes 1 down, 3 to go, right? So what do we do once we found a solution? We just go right into synthetic division, right? We're going to break down this polynomial here. So we'll use synthetic division. That will allow us to break it down into a third degree polynomial, right? So we'll bring down to 2, right? 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, we get negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1, we get negative 6. Negative 6 times negative 1 is positive 6. And then 3 times negative 1 gives us negative 3, so we get the 0 here as we expected. Okay. All right, so what do these 4 numbers represent here, though? Right? These 4 numbers represent a third degree polynomial, right? The coefficients of a third degree polynomial, right? Remember, what we've done is we've broken this fourth degree polynomial down into what? The product of x plus 1 and what? Right? 2x cubed minus x squared minus 6x plus 3, right? So 2x cubed minus x squared minus 6x and plus 3. And you notice there's no remainder here, right? If we actually went ahead and multiplied these two out, we would get the original polynomial. Okay, no remainder, nothing else to add after that, right? So here we go. We're down to a third degree polynomial. Okay, so now we got to find the roots of this third degree, right? Now in this case, this is actually factorable, right? We can factor this one by grouping. So we'll take out the 2x squared from the first 2 terms. Okay. So we get 2x squared. And then we get what? Oh, actually just the x squared, right? We'll just factor out the x squared. And then we get 2x minus 1. And then from the last 2 terms here, we'll take out a 3. We get a 2x minus 1 here. Okay. So what does that mean? It means that we still have that x plus 1 to begin with. But now we have a factor of 2x minus 1. And we have the factor of x squared minus 3, right? So what we're doing is we're just breaking down this fourth degree polynomial into a product of its factors, right? Think about that. This factor tells us what one of the solutions are, right? It tells us that x equals -1 is a solution, which we determined, right? But actually, this factor tells us another solution, right? What does this factor tell us? This factor tells us that x equals +1/2 is also a solution. What about this one, x squared minus 3? What does that tell us? Well, we can actually solve this one, right? If we set x squared minus 3 equal to 0 and solve this, we can add the 3 to both sides. And notice, when we take the square root of both sides, we get plus or minus square root of 3. So what are the four solutions? The four solutions are -1/2, -1, +1/2, positive radical 3, and negative radical 3.